All right, guys, let's get started. So we're going to be looking at the next phase of Castro's domestic policies, which is social control and repression. So when we look at his actions towards, having more control over society, um, his early critics focused more on his harshness towards former members of Batista's regimes, and also the banning of political parties and the promise of elections. But you should already know why he banned political parties and the elections and what was the rationale behind that. So you should be familiar with that. But when we look at these Batista's regime and the execution, remember how in during the revolution, um, soldiers and just corrupt officials who had been found guilty of committing heinous acts such as kidnapping, torture, rape, murder, those individuals were taken care of during the revolution, as in they were put in a trial up in the mountains and then executed if found guilty. Same thing was happening after Castro wins. The idea was, in how he justified, was that this new Cuban government would uphold the law and bring justice to Cuban society. No longer was Cuban society going to be um, guided by this corruption. And if you were somebody that was harmed by the Batista regime, which a lot of people were, you are going to have your justice finally under Castro. Um, and so the way that this is justified is that it ensured that the Cuban Revolution would not fall into this chaos, vengeful attacks, uh, vigilantes, anarchists, random attacks, public disorder, all of this chaos, which usually comes about right after a major shift in government or just in society. Castro avoided that completely, which is very rare, a very rare thing to see. Um, and the reason why is because of that. He was sending a very strong message with these public executions of, we're not here to play. If you were somebody that effed up and, and you committed these really horrible acts, you're going to pay for that because the Cuban people want that. So, of course, again, viewed as very harsh, and some people view it as harsh even today. But Castro and his brother admitted, like, you know what, maybe we did this the wrong way. Maybe we shouldn't have done it that way later on. But they also pointed out that there's a lot of hypocrisy in it, and in the fact that, if they had not have done this, the Cuban Revolution would have failed, or any progress that the revolution achieved would have failed. Um, Additionally, they also pointed out that the hypocrisy of many people, many in Cuban society, um, from the international community, I'm so sorry, the hypocrisy of the international community basically stayed silent when Batista was doing all of these things against the peasants. And the people also stayed silent and actually cheered when the trials against the former Nazis were being done and they were being executed once they were found guilty, right? And so he's saying, well, I'm executing those who committed genocide against the Cubans, and how come you're not cheering us when you cheered that for the Nazis? And rightfully so, right? The only good Nazi is a dead Nazi, and I think that's what he was um, trying to put out when he was saying these things. Next one. So when we continue to look, um, there was some internal opposition within the Communist Party in Cuba, because there was some communists in the party who disagreed with the ties that Cuba was growing with the USSR. For whatever reason, your book doesn't give me details on that. But additionally, one of the arguments is said that, well, maybe Castro didn't really need to use a lot of acts of repression, because he allowed Cubans to just leave and encouraged them. And it's like, bro, if you don't like it here, you can go. All these other Cubans are cool with it. You can go if you want to. And some Cubans were like, all right, then I guess we're going to go. And so some left. But yeah, he encouraged them. He's like, here's a boat. Feel free to go. And he encouraged the Cuban citizens who stayed to turn their back on those Cubans and label them as basically scum and traitors. And that's what they did. You can see in that picture below, um, of what's happening. Uh, you also have to acknowledge, though, that there were some Cubans that left because they were against Castro. There were some Cubans that left because they wanted to take their money with them before Castro distributed their land. And there were some Cubans that left because of the economic issues that Cuba faced because of the embargo. Okay, last one. So over the following years, Castro increased his security and established secret police to go after traitors, spies, and enemies. Again, this is all justified by some historians who point out that, Castro had a legitimate reason to be paranoid. And I don't even know if I would call that paranoia if you are being proven correct. The United States government did not like Cuba because of the communist ties, and so the United States government posed a real threat, which we all saw what happened with the Bay of Pigs and the CIA, all of that stuff. U.S. corporations who lost influence were consistently, who lost income and who lost their profits were consistently pressuring the United States government to do something to Cuba, to invade Cuba. This again, the CIA was in Cuba trying to push out uh, anti-revolution propaganda, anti-Castro propaganda, and training people and, planning terrorist attacks in Cuba. There was over 600 assassination attempts against Castro through the CIA. It sounds really insane, but, you know, you can literally find a list of this. The American mafia, who lost their drug gambling and prostitution trades, were pretty pissed off. They wanted that back. They were also pressuring the US government, which sounds really weird that the mafia would be like, hey, government, can you do this? When the mafia usually tries to like go against the government, but not in this situation. And other US supported Latin American countries who were anti Castro, who were feared that his revolution would spread through the domino effect, which we'll learn about the domino effect when we get to that as well. With a long list of enemies, a threat to Cuba and Castro personally, this was rationalized to a degree, right? He might have gone overboard in some situations, but to a degree, he was justified in taking these preventative measures of trying to protect Cuba, um, for Cuba to survive. Cuba would not have survived if he would have just allowed things to kind of like flow naturally. Um, Proven point, August 1959, a coup was organized by the Dominican Republic dictator and ensured Castro that, like, yeah, you know what, the United States is trying to sponsor these coups against us, and more will probably come, and he was not wrong. But anyways, that's it. Have a good day.